Yuri's Revenge is the expansion to Westwood's Command & Conquer Red Alert 2. It's one of Westwood's most ambitious expansion packs they've ever created, and the fact that they've not only added new missions, but they've also added a whole new third faction to fight against the Allies and the Soviets. It's the result of not only items that Westwood had wanted to include in the original Red Alert 2, but they just didn't have time, but also they've listened to the fans and incorporated many of their suggestions into the game. The storyline takes place immediately after the war between the Soviets and the Allies. Romanov is in prison, languishing in his cell, and the Allies are celebrating, saying, "We've won, finally." But then Yuri shows up again. They had never captured him, and he's got these psychic dominators he had built during the war. They're just now coming online, and they're converting the world's population to mindless drones. Luckily, the Allies are able to keep the psychic dominator on Alcatraz Island in San Francisco powered down long enough for them to use one of Einstein's new creation called a time machine. And they go back in time to destroy the psychic dominator before it becomes active in the present. The Soviets, however, see a new way to win the war. They can use this time machine to alter the events in the past. The new missions, there are 14 new missions, 7 for the Soviets and 7 for the Allies. Yuri doesn't get a campaign, strangely enough, because Westwood says that they want Yuri to be the hated enemy, the common hated enemy of both sides. But you're also not limited to these 14 missions, because there are also 10 cooperative missions that you can play on Westwood Online with a friend to challenge the computer in some campaign scenarios. And new missions are nice and all, but fans really are looking to see the new units and how they balance out. The Soviets have a gap in their defenses because Yuri left, so they don't have all the super technology they had, like the psychic radar and the cloning vats. So they're going to need to rely on their brute force even more. But luckily, they'll be able to achieve that because they have one of their new buildings is an industrial plant that allows you to build your vehicles at a cheaper price. They also have something called a siege helicopter, which will strafe ground units when it's flying in the air. But you can also land it and deploy it into a cannon that will fire at really long ranges at enemy defenses and such. And what's really cool about them is that you can stick them on a plateau where nobody can reach you, and they'll be really, really hard to take out. The Allied side is perhaps the most well-rounded with all their sides. What's really helpful to them is something called a Guardian GI, which will deploy into a little bunker just like the regular GI, but they use a concrete bunker, so they cannot be run over by tanks. And they have a rocket launcher that are really effective against taking out enemy tanks. So early on rushing will not work with them as well, because the tanks will just get shattered really quickly. The new Allied vehicle is a battle fortress, which you can stick 5 infantry units in there, and it'll rumble across the battlefield, and it can even crush enemy tanks. I mean, this thing is really brutal. And it acts like a mobile garrison building in that the infantry units can fire out when anybody comes close to it. So it's pretty tough. Now, as distinct as the Allies and Russians may be, Yuri is totally different in how they play and how they function. They're kind of a little hard to master, but they have some really powerful individual units. Starting off the infantry, you've gotten this Initiate, which uses his mind to attack people. It's not really good, just good for massing and garrisoning buildings and stuff. Your Brute, on the other hand, is a mutated soldier whose primary function is like an anti-tank unit and to beat up on buildings with his fists. Yuri doesn't get any dogs, however, so spy checking will require a little bit of micromanagement, but luckily you have your psychic tower, and that will pick up on spies trying to enter your base. It'll show the little dotted line that they're coming towards your base. If you check back periodically, you'll be able to stop them pretty often. Their hero unit is Yuri himself, who is really strong in that he can take over enemy buildings as well. When you take over any building, you can also sell it immediately. So if you're not defending against him, then he can just sweep through your base, taking over buildings, selling them, taking over, selling them, and you'll find you have nothing left. You also have a Chaos Drone, which is really cool in that it will emit a hallucinogenic gas that will cause all friendly units, all enemy units to fire on their friends before they fire on your guys. So you can just, if you have a crowd of like 8 enemy units coming towards you, they're all firing each other and you can just retreat. So because Yuri's Revenge offers so much, the new missions, the new units, and the interface changes and such things like that, it's definitely a game that you want to get excited about, whether you're a fan already or even a person who disliked the original Red Alert 2 because of its pacing. Yuri's Revenge has changed the pacing slightly with the new units because they do a lot more balancing, so you'll find rushing isn't as easy to pull off anymore against an experienced player. And it should be shipping within a couple weeks, so be on the lookout.